Hi, my guest on today's CCA Leadership Development Community interview series is Rhiddi Patel, President of Abacus Actuaries and Director of Retirement Benefits at the Walt Disney Company. Rhiddi, for this last segment, as part of our interview today, I want to talk about leadership and your perspective on leadership. So when you think about the people that you consider to be successful leaders, what are the traits that they have? How do they demonstrate that leadership in their day-to-day activity?
I'd say self-awareness, curiosity, and then I'd say like a listening mindset, right? So those are three things that come to mind, and some of it comes, like, I think it can also be encapsulated back to, like, from a tactical action is like seeking feedback. And so, being aware of, like, what I mentioned this earlier, but identifying your strengths, and being aware of what value they bring to the table, being able to listen and not be defensive, and especially in that, like, the curiosity piece and seeking feedback. It's about being open-minded, I'd say, and I think those traits have I've kind of seen that in people that have gotten to leadership positions. And then I think leading a team is maybe a different component. And some of that, what I consider a successful leader, is investing in your team as well. I'd say to kind of marry the two. I had a leader who I think was like 4 levels above me. And, I'd done a presentation and he called me to tell me his feedback. And, I knew in that moment, it's like, gosh, like, I didn't think I was looking at him. He didn't look at me when I happened to be giving eye contact, right? And so it's like, I didn't think that I wasn't giving eye contact. It was just timing, perhaps, or whatever it was. But in the moment, I was like, wow, like, I can't believe that he took 20 minutes out of his day, even if it was like 10 minutes at the time, to just call me and give me that feedback. And so I think that, it's the giving back or investing in your teams, and then to get to that leadership position, I think it is that self-awareness and seeking feedback and being open-minded.
What I think is interesting about that is that there's nothing in there that you said that has anything to do with someone's technical abilities, right? And especially as an actuary, sometimes people with those really good technical abilities can sometimes get put into leadership roles. But everything you're saying about successful leaders has more to do with relationships than it does with somebody's technical chops.
Yeah, and maybe it's because of I mentioned earlier, like, I learned all my leadership skills, I think, at AT&T in corporate, and it was a non-actuarial role. And so I bring that perspective versus maybe a more traditional actuarial role.
So talk to us for a few minutes about who some of your role models are when it comes to leadership, and how have you tried to emulate their examples in what you do?
Yeah, I'd say when I first went to AT&T, I had just this incredible chain of command. And I think all of them embodied what there's a term called servant leadership. And they all embodied that. And it's basically servant leadership. You're prioritizing the team, the good of everyone over yourself. But it was tactics like, and it's just so subtle, right? So I'm an analyst, or an individual contributor, and doing financial analysis and putting together a presentation. Now I might send a draft to my boss, and he tweaks it and he makes it his own, and it, like, brings out the flair, and especially when I was first there. But then during the presentation, it would be like, well, Rhiddi did all the work, so this is her project, that was her idea. And so the real simple, like, one of the simplest tactics was just giving credit where credit is due. And since then, I've worked with other leaders where you have that pretty standard story of, like, you see the examples of people taking credit for work that they didn't do, or it's like, when when a project is successful, that means that I did a good job. And if it's failing, it's like, well, they didn't do it right, you know? And so
Mm-hmm.
I think, again, that mindset of a servant leader is something that I, you know, again, my entire chain of command, I'd say when I first joined AT&T, really embodied that, and, you know, really tried to promote their individuals on our team to elevate them and give them opportunities and give them credit. That same call, when I got told, you know, I didn't make enough eye contact, and I think I said a few too many times, but I was like, oh wow, like I'm definitely not presenting to the CHRO next week. Like there was another meeting that was the same meeting, but it was going to be to the CHRO, and I was like, well, guess I'm not presenting. I talked to my boss the next day, and I was like, well, Tom called it and said this, and you know, I'm ready to take a step back if you need me to. And I remember my direct boss and his boss made the call, and we're like, oh no, you're fine to present. And both the senior VP and the VP didn't know that I was going to present until I started speaking in the meeting with the CHRO. And so just having those two leaders take a bet on me is another example of like, wow, like they would have been scolded if I failed, you know, and it would have probably not turned out the way it turned out for me. But, you know, thank goodness they took a bet and empowered me to do the presentation. And then I took the feedback and obviously practiced instead of just winging it. And so I think that's, you know, that's an example of how I think about that servant leadership model kind of playing out.
I love that, because I think the components in there, right, are really around you succeed and fail as a team, not necessarily as an individual. And then from a leadership perspective, looking for those opportunities to help build people up,
Yeah.
right? Which part of that can be, I think, you can be candid with people about, hey, here are the things that I saw that you know, I really want you to focus on this and work on this because it's going to make you that much better.
Yep, exactly.
Right. So it's not shying away. It's giving the constructive feedback when it's necessary and to help somebody progress, not shying away from it. It's not just about the pats on the back.
Yeah, there's a term called radical candor. That's another kind of tactic in that leadership realm of, you know, you almost need to be honest to have someone develop. And then they need to be open to receiving it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously you're an actuary, you've worked with a bunch of actuaries. What do you view as the important skills for future successful leaders within the actuarial profession?
So I think I always go back to data. One, we live in a world where data is increasing, you know, to the point where I think about my Apple, you know, cloud storage fees, like I'm going to have to upgrade from the whatever 100 gigabytes to the next tier. And so it's like, there's just going to be more and more data. And I know that the profession is looking at big data and, you know, predictive analytics and things like that. And so I think with that context, having the skills, when I think about leadership, it's having the skills to process that data. We have it, but then actually drawing insights from it. So what does that mean? And how do you tell a story? Because I think about my career, and I think part of why I've excelled is I can share that, like, this is what the data says, and I don't even have to convince you because the data is going to do the convincing for me. And so when I do a pitch deck on the, you know, the fertility benefits, it's like, here's what the data says, and here's this study, and here's that study, but I think that drawing the insights from the data that you have access to is going to be a key skill in anyone's success in this profession. And then I think that recognizing that we all have biases even when we process data, and to think about how we, you know, how do you truly take the information that's being presented and make sure that you poke holes at it and confirm that it's like unbiased, or, you know, think about drilling down before you just jump to a conclusion.
No, great insights there. Great recommendations. Well, Rhiddi, I want to thank you for joining me today on our podcast. And again, I know we mentioned this in the prior segment, but for people that want to follow along with what you're doing or what's going on at Abacus Actuaries, where should they go?
LinkedIn is probably the best place, most up to date, and then yeah, abacusactuaries.org, or contact me.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank my guest today, Rhiddi Patel. And just as a reminder, the leadership development community of the CCA is open to any actuary. You can reach out to the CCA to join that community. I want to thank CCA staff, especially Shannon Peterson, for helping to organize today's event, and to our leadership development community steering committee for helping with everything with this interview. Join us for upcoming CCA events and follow us online on social media and on our website. Thanks again, Rhiddi.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thanks everyone for joining.